Welcome to today's edition of Joya Sonye Live. It's wonderful to be here. There is a conversation I had promised my followers some time ago that immediately after the elections that happened, the presidential elections in the US, a lot of people have been analyzing and giving suggestions as to what it really, the real implication for Africa and Nigeria especially, the economic implications, the immigration policies that Trump has been not subtly really talking about. We'd also talk about the conduct of that election and the takeaway for Africa and the takeaway for Nigeria. Well, it's exciting to discuss this very important issue, especially as the Ondo elections is simultaneously tomorrow. That's the 16th of November. We would just oppose this and know where exactly are we moving forward in our electioneering process. That's a conversation we will be having. And in the studio to discuss this is a former commissioner public official in the US who served as a commissioner housing and community development in Maryland. He also is the co-founder Nigerian American Congress, that's the Nigerian American Leadership Council, including being the person who coined the name Nigerian America in 2006. He ran for Labour Party and is in 2019 as a presidential aspirant. It's an honor to have him join us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, Honorable Okey Sam Mbonu.
Thank you very much, Joy. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, I'm most excited that you just came from Washington, and you were part of the election and you walked around the campaigns and all of that. So there's so much to hear from right here. Yes. And the beauty is that you two have had a sting in the Nigerian political terrain.
Yep.
Okay, we'll go for a very short break. When we return, we'll get to the issue at hand. How is the election in the US so different from that of Nigeria? What are the takeaways for both countries? There is such a thing. We'll be right back. Welcome back from that short break. Honorable Mbonu, let's just talk about, first of all, the conduct of the elections. I saw it on TV. I followed it, did not sleep all night that Saturday, and I watched how seamless it was. Yes. I mean, you have experienced both countries have these elections. First of all, how did you find the elections there, and when you just pose it with when we have it here in the country?
Yeah, what is a very huge fundamental difference, because the United States, it's a model federal state. Nigeria, in name, it's a federal state as well, but it beats me as to why some of the fundamentals of federalism have not been incorporated into governance here, because that is actually part of the reason why all of the chaos that happened around the elections in Nigeria happened, regardless of who wins or who loses. Now, in a federal state such as in the United States, every state has an independent INEC, which has nothing to do with the federal government. Yeah.
Right.
There is no federal version of an INEC that goes around posting commissioners here and there, sending people to monitor elections. Every state is like a country that controls its elections, its education, and its police, among other things. And so what happens in the election, similar to what you just saw in the last US presidential elections, is that as the state organs conduct these elections through their local government areas called counties, each county also is like a government on its own. So the counties conduct these elections, certify the voters, do the count, and then supply the numbers to their state secretariat, to the state secretary of state, because every state has a secretary of state as well. And then the secretary of state, after they collect all of the numbers, they certify the result. And then they supply the number that they get, whatever they get, at a collation center which just collects election results. Nothing to do
with anything else,
right? They just collect it. And the federal government in Washington, for example, cannot do anything to disrupt an election that is happening in Texas or Maryland or any of the 50 states. They don't have the power to do that. They don't have the right to do that. They can never do that constitutionally. So they take whatever number that the state brings them. And if anyone, for any reason, wants to challenge the result of a particular state, they have to go back. First of all, it has to be somebody who's within that state,
that jurisdiction.
And then that person will actually have to provide some form of evidence, and then that evidence will be litigated by the state organs, the state courts, and whatever decision they come up with, you are bound with it. You cannot take it beyond there.
Right.
So the states are as powerful and collectively in some ways more powerful than the federal government. And the federal government has certain things that are delineated for them in the Constitution, such as to raise an army, foreign affairs, to regulate interstate commerce, and to enter into treaties with foreign governments. But most of the most important aspects of a citizen's life is controlled by what happens at the states and the counties. And so in Nigeria, where some federal agency that is appointed by some president determines who is going to go and conduct an election in a given state, like somebody from Abuja, the federal government sends a commissioner or elections officer to Adamawa or to Cross River or to Anambra, and all of these people are controlled by a central body.
The federal INEC.
Yeah, you can see how much of a recipe it is for electoral disaster, because nothing needs to go wrong in the states. All it needs is for something to go wrong with the federal organ that controls those elections, and everything goes haywire. Now, in the United States, let's say somebody wants to be mischievous to influence the elections, then you have to go around from one state to another state, right? To go around the 50 states to try to influence them. Now, ordinarily, campaigns are for persuading people in different places, and people have issues. People in Maryland may not have the same issues as
exactly
in Texas.
So it's a tough one.
Yeah,
getting to the peculiarity of your issues and addressing that.
Yeah. So basically, it's a foolproof way to ensure the sanctity of the votes. The states have the powers to do these things. And until Nigeria begins to really re-examine the overall structure, if we're going to call this a federalist state, then these fundamentals need to be thought out.
Units must have some sort of control.
Of course, the states have to be so powerful that nobody from Abuja can go to a state and tell them what to do.
But we also have the state independent electoral commissions. I mean, they still have that chain of control with the federal. However, there's been speculations and criticism of that structure, because the governors often take over. Look at the local government elections that they often control, that the state electoral commissions now. Very rarely does it go against the administration or the political party of the governor. You see that all states in that, all local government in that state has won elections, and so you also know this cannot be. It's not possible that all the local governments are for the governor's political party. Does it concern you also that should we give the states that much strength with the political and democratic terrain that Nigeria is at the moment? The governors would only be emboldened.
Well, there's a limit to how far the governors could be emboldened to influence elections. Maybe because now it's a new process. It's evolving, and starting with local government area elections. So you might find, whatever structures that the governors have designed on the ground, they may actually maybe finance candidates that are perhaps within their political affiliation. But when it comes to, let's say, maybe a federal presidential election,
right?
Okay, that state should also be able to just conduct that election and then supply their result to ultimately whoever is collating the numbers on a federal presidential elections, and those numbers should be sacrosanct. because when a presidential election is on, there's much more at stake. And if a particular governor is going to disenfranchise his entire state, just to be
in control and own that structure we keep talking about,
then that has a limit to how far it could go.
Okay, so Honorable, we'll go for yet another short break. When we return from that, we'll get into the implication of the U.S. elections to Nigeria. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Welcome back from that. We're still discussing U.S. elections and its implication on Africa. Honorable Okey Sam Mbonu is still right here with us. Again, I thank you for staying back. You are just, if you can collect your thoughts, you're talking about the difference in the getting units, state units empowered enough to hold credible elections. You had also gotten to where we were talking about this influence governors often have on this unit as well. Yeah.
Well, the other critical part of these elections that will help to ensure credibility in the conduct of these elections is how candidates are actually funded, because in the United States, candidates basically ask their supporters to contribute resources to them. It doesn't have to be a lot of money. It could be the equivalent of 1,000 naira, 5,000 naira. There's a limit. There's a campaign contribution limit that each individual can give. But by people contributing to push their own candidate along, they also will determine that their candidate has a chance of winning by actually holding accountable the agency that's going to count those votes. And so an agency like the state INEC who's actually counting those votes cannot in good conscience, or well, it's never been done because there are criminal penalties anyway, to now try to compromise votes that hundreds of thousands or millions of people have pitched in their money and because basically they are investing in the candidate. So they are watching these things, and they will not stand for these elections to be rigged. But the most important thing is that in a presidential election, that the controlling agency for those elections cannot be a federal government agency. They have to allow the states to bring their results in, and that's just the way to ensure that democracy is being practiced as a federalist democracy.
That just brought to mind something that happened in Adamawa State not long ago, where during the general elections, the gubernatorial elections, where a resident electoral commissioner just came, announced results even when he had not finished collation, and other political parties were shocked. Where is this coming from? He announced, he called the media and announced the winner with what he had, even though collation was going on. So that exposes the kind of flaws in our electoral laws. I mean, it's not in the law. The Electoral Act or the Nigeria Electoral Act spells it out, but that exposes the brazenness that politicians can go to get their will done. How, looking at both countries, how can we strengthen us back here? Who should have this political will? Is it among CSOs? Is it among the Nigerian people? Are lawmakers that enjoy from this loophole? Do you think they would make policies that would change things? Well,
ultimately they will have to go in that direction, because even though
who will nudge them really?
Well, everybody working along at the same time, because the CSOs have a very important role to play. Now the actual citizens have to come to a place where they should have a limit to brazenness. And there are criminal penalties in the books. Now, I'm sure that the Electoral Act in Nigeria has criminal penalties for certain activities that undermine the votes. Now, the votes of a given people are so sacrosanct that stealing the votes of one person and transferring it to another person is almost like stabbing someone in the heart.
That's really.
That's how bad.
And it's not one person, because I mean, votes, millions of people.
Millions of people. It's like executing a bunch of people because they have voted their interest, whatever their interest is. And in a lot of cases, it comes down to basic issues like the economy. Am I going to be able to feed my kids at night and things like that?
This person's manifesto resonates with me.
Yeah. And you find that a situation where a given candidate is clearly more credible than one candidate who may even have a criminal background and a record of doing things a certain way, and the people determine that they're not going to elect that person, and there's somebody who's an electoral officer brazenly collects money from that person and then just transfer the votes for them. That should call for serious criminal sanctions. And there should not be anywhere about that. But in an event, in a situation where maybe even the judiciary may be compromised, then they give the people no chance but to take the laws into their hands. If the judiciary is compromised, they cannot preserve the integrity of the people's will. And so all of this is a process which I think that Nigeria is evolving, but at a very gradual pace. The pace should be quickened because without elevating the practice of democracy in Nigeria as it is, then the country is going to slide back very rapidly, really, because every other nation is moving on. And when it slides back, one day you're going to find maybe a small clique of people in power with zero accountability to the people. And that is when people are actually going to see the dire consequences of not acting up, of not being involved. And so it cannot be laissez-faire. It cannot be like, okay, we'll just wait, this one is done now, he will soon finish. No, that complacency is going to mean people dropping dead. It's going to mean people not having medicine. Exactly. It's going to mean children not having anything to eat. It's going to mean every aspect of life revolves around who you entrust with power over you. And so the citizens ordinarily have to be prepared to do heavy lifting. Heavy lifting doesn't mean you have to go out there and bear arms, but you have to vocalize evil when you see it. And as you do this, then there's even the biggest tyrant in the world doesn't really want to sit around and hear people call them out. They will try to do a little something. It's human nature.
Well, it depends on who you ask, because back here in Nigeria, we've seen that laissez-faire, in spite of everything, the people stand up to criticize and all of that. But let's get back to the U.S. elections. In retrospect, what would you say worked for Donald Trump?
Well, it's a very interesting election, and it was an election that defied a lot of people's anticipation, even the pollsters who have substantial expertise in going out there and gathering data. A lot of people were taken off balance. But what in effect happens is that one candidate, Mr. Trump in this case, went directly to the people with messaging that either put them on hyper alert against a certain candidate, or put some phobia in them, or created a situation where they feel that if they do not vote for him, that they're going to be at a substantial loss. But it's not illegal to do that.
It's politics.
It's politics. Yeah, a candidate can do that. A candidate can determine that, well, I'm going to set my messaging this way, and go directly to the heart of the people. And then also there are life issues also that candidates will be concerned, that citizens will be concerned about, that will influence their votes. And if one candidate highlights those issues better than others, for example, in the US, most of the issues really revolve to economic, to the individual. Am I going to be empowered by this person if he wins, or am I going to slide further back where whatever I had before, I'm not going to have it anymore? Or pocketbook issues, like ever since the pandemic, prices have risen all over the world. You
Right.
know, it's gone down a bit, but you know, it was a little higher than it is before now. But now, grocery stores, for example, where people buy their basic food staples, the prices have gone way beyond where they used to be. And the average family might find, well, why am I spending $300 on a grocery bill when I was spending $100 before? It must be the fault of the government.
Government, right.
Yeah. Now, if it's not, it doesn't necessarily have to be the fault of the government, but one candidate was not able to articulate it clearly that these are the reasons why prices have gotten to where they are. And so if this candidate is telling you that it's because of government policy, he's actually not being truthful, because at the end of the day, there's not going to be much change in that narrow area. Okay, but you know, in this case, Mr. Trump was successful in going all out and saturating the country with his peculiar message. And you know, you got to give him some credit for his skills in doing that, whether it's, you know, good or bad. You know, he was just able to do that. And then there are also candidates. What happens also is that in most presidential elections in the U.S., there are three categories of people. There are people who consider themselves liberal, so no matter which candidate Democratic Party brings forth, they will be on that line.
Right.
There are people who consider themselves as conservatives, so no matter who is sworn in for the conservative side, they'll go with it. And then there's a category of people in the middle, the undecided, and they mostly live in about 7 or 10 states of the U.S., and those people hold their opinion very close to them, and they don't make up their mind until the dying moments of the election. And that's where the campaigns, the bulk of the campaigns, put their energy. You know, states like in the United States, that would be states like Pennsylvania is one of those most important swing states, because it's a very large state with a varying population of people. And then there are states like North Carolina, and there are states like Georgia, Virginia, Wisconsin. So you find that in these states, the candidates have to spend a lot of energy and resources to persuade these people. And whoever gets the persuasive power in these areas ends up winning the election. Now, in this particular election, it went a little bit beyond that, because there were places that were former Democratic strongholds that the Democratic candidate, VP Harris, had a good chance on, but they lost those states. So what is going on now is there's a lot of introspection. They have to examine what are the reasons why they've lost those states.
Right.
Yeah, and all of those are going to inform what happens in the next 4 years.
Right.
You know, nobody's going to go to war or anything like that. You're just going to have to let the system go and then, you know, prepare for the next time around. Yeah.
So the Republican Party seemed to have taken over the House, including the Senate as well, which will make his agenda and his the priority policies that he has a bit seamless for him in terms of pushing. Would that affect? I mean, that healthy balance that that is. You usually enjoy in the House and all that. Would it affect policies and all that? Absolutely,
absolutely. This is a bit of an unprecedented moment in American history, because in most cases, at the end of a presidential year, there's a balance, some form of balance. You know, the one party holds the presidency, another party might hold the Congress, which is the Senate and the House of Reps, and very rarely has one party have an overwhelming control in all of these parties. So that is also a matter for historical research and study. A lot of study is to go into that. And beyond that, a president also gets a chance to appoint a certain number of Supreme Court judges as the judges retire or die, because it's a lifetime appointment. And in the last Donald Trump term, he was able to appoint more candidates to the Supreme Court, where there's 3 is out of the 9 there now. There's a 6-3 margin in his favor. And so with Mr. Trump and the Republicans going into power again with that kind of margin, it's going to be unprecedented in how this power is going to be used to steer things in whatever direction that they want to, whether good or bad. But the opposition is going to be alive to their responsibilities as well, to try, because sometimes in the United States Congress, where the laws are actually made, there's a lot of existing relationships already. Members of Congress who from time to time have to compromise, for each other in order to get things done for their districts. So those relationships remain. So you're going to find that there's going to be some negotiation back and forth. But where it's going to be more critical is in the United States Senate, because the Senate is the body that confirms the president's appointees. And it's a very critical role, because whoever the president decides to put in a sensitive role, such as an attorney general or secretary for health, is going to have tremendous power to undo or do a whole lot of things. And in a situation where in the United States Senate now, the Republicans control the Senate, anyone that may have been ordinarily difficult to confirm will now be perhaps a candidate that they can easily confirm. And that will mean that going forward, the trajectory of the United States might begin to go in a certain direction. For one thing, based on Mr. Trump's campaign and policies and public statements, the U.S. is going to grow a little more insular. Right. Yeah, they're not going to be as cooperative in dealing with external relations anymore. If he sticks to his campaign rhetoric, that's the direction that it's going to go. And so that will begin to affect multilateral engagements, for the United States, or even where United States provides some kind of aid, whether it's direct aid through U.S. Agency for International Development or through or military aid for that matter. So all of this now is going to be a question of wait and see. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, following his victory, a lot of Africans are holding their breath as to what he had, like you said, his rhetoric around immigration, not just for the illegal immigrants, but opening up America for certain individuals as well. You think he will follow through it? That has been all he has had to say, sometimes in the most crude manner.
Yeah. I mean, he has his style, certainly, but the one thing, it's pretty clear that the man has a conservative agenda as far as immigration is concerned, and so whatever opportunities for migrating into the United States is going to shrink. It's going to shrink right now. It's not just shrinking for African countries or Central American countries, but his areas of migration to the United States might be different from what other administrations in the past has, and the country is going to get more conservative, whereby if there was some kind of an opportunity for, say, people in Nigeria to migrate to the United States and take their skills for a better life as immigrants, that is going to be constrained right now, because in previous times he has made it clear his interest in one area versus the other. Now it doesn't mean the doors are going to be closed completely, of course, but it will be constrained, and and that's kind of interesting, because when you follow social media, you see that Mr. Trump actually seems to have a lot of people who admire him in places like Nigeria particularly.
I was surprised. I saw the conversation. It was, and I said this some time ago. I don't know if it's that we are reflecting our fear for women in power, but you tell me, you know both countries.
Well, actually, the thing is, That's part of it, actually, because Nigerians have a peculiar way of looking at political leadership. And Nigerians, in my view, appear to be quick to scale down their expectations from people who are actually going to lead them. You know, like if somebody was arrested by the police last year over a murder of 10 people and was a kidnapper, and then all of a sudden, you know, became rich and comes to run for office in Nigeria, some people, especially people from his part of Nigeria, will actually say,
he's our thief, leave him, right?
You know, those kind of things.
He may be a thief, but he's ours.
Yeah.
Leave him. You have your thief as well.
So when that happens,
really.
yeah, they have lowered their expectations, and the painful thing about it is that when people lower their expectations and put the wrong person into office, they should not complain. They have no rights to complain that that person is not doing right or not doing things that are affecting their pocketbook, because they already lowered their guard to let that person come in. And you know, so the way they look at maybe a foreign presidential election, it doesn't really bother them that you know, someone is seen a certain way by at least half the population in that person's country and has issues that they have to answer to. You know, I think they sort of look at it like, you know, they like the, you know, killing get him. It might be a little bit like a movie, but it's
very entertaining.
It's entertaining.
We love the drama.
Yeah, it's entertaining, but it's real. But of course, you know, cultures, you know, have their various ways of looking at things. But the interesting thing is that because the Nigerian, so let's say maybe more in social media. I don't know about the rest of Nigeria, because Nigeria is still a huge country, over 220 million. But you know, the ones that are active on social media who admire the president that just won, it doesn't mean that that president is going to love them back. You know, and whatever he said he's going to do, or he has done in the past, or he plans he's going to do, is how he's going to do it. Maybe it will matter to some, maybe it won't matter to others, but you know, it doesn't, you know, gain them any kind of you know, leverage for that support, because at the end of the day, each country also have their own interests to protect. You know, that's really what counts for countries at the end of the day. And the same thing also should count for individuals when you bring it down to the individual level. You know, if ultimately every living human being has an interest in self-preservation, and so they need those things that will preserve their lives, you know, food, clothing, shelter. And when people go into the political space to vote, those interests that are permanent, self-preservation, for them as individuals, for the group, for the you know, various people in various groups in the society, could be example, association of farmers, for example, may have an interest in being able to farm freely without security violations, so that they can make money. And so whatever candidate that's going to protect their interests is typically the candidate that they're supposed to support, if they are thinking normally and rationally. But you know, Nigeria is still evolving, so
Unfortunately, now whoever, it doesn't matter who comes with the good intentions or seemingly good intentions. It's about does it come from my side of the country? Is he of my religion? It's unfortunate that we still have this conversation. But what happens to Donald Trump's legal issues at the moment? I mean, with his victory, does he still enjoy the immunity? Are we going to see a president-elect appear in court? I mean, that's unlikely, of course.
Well, no, not before January 20, because he's sworn in January 20, so the term actually starts in January. So for right now, the courts still have power over those matters. But in the particular case that that he already faced in New York City, which is sort of like the one that is hanging,
allegation.
Yeah. So judges are trained to weigh the overriding public interest. And it is possible that the judge might decide to postpone that sentencing that is coming up. I believe it's coming up either end of November or December, something like that. Or the judge might decide to actually end the case, but they're going to have to write an opinion, whatever it is that the judge ends up doing. Right now, the arguments going on back and forth. The judge has requested arguments from the defense, from the Trump side, and requested arguments from the prosecution. So right now, those arguments are due in court, perhaps maybe in about a week or thereabout, and the judge is going to have to go over all of those arguments and see and consider who has the superior argument, and he will rule in favor of that. There's some bit of latitude to that, but also this is totally unprecedented territory. Most things that Donald Trump has done has been in the unprecedented area.
Everything is experimental. So we're getting to test your laws. We're getting to test
everything is being tested, and so. But the thing is that in arriving at some form of a resolution, the thinkers in the society also have to think long term. They have to think 50 years down the road, 70 years down the road, 100 years down the road. Do we want to be bound by situations like this? But it presents a significant opportunity for them to resolve this one way or the other. And then no republic is perfect. They may just have to maybe change some of their laws going down the road. The only other way that it will affect the U.S. as perhaps as a model country for many other countries around the world is that some countries around the world might say, well, if you did this, then, we can do this, or we can do that, or we can do that. Yeah, and so that's why there has to be some seriousness. And I'm sure the United States has some pretty substantial number of intellectuals that are probably, going over all these models, all these scenarios to make a final decision. And at the end of the day, a decision will be made. My hunch is that, Mr. Trump will go into office seamlessly and begin to execute his agenda. And then the political process in the future will have to bear out whatever happens.
Now, one of his agendas he pledged during his elections to end the Ukraine-Russian conflict, and he said it so playfully. I have a video of him saying that he would just call Putin and make this call and tell them you can't be killing people. You have to end it. That's how casual he put it. But has he got it in him? Considering the support Ukraine has gotten, the stance America has had in this war, is it as simple as a phone call as he made it?
Well, I mean, it's not going to be exactly a phone call, but the thing is that the charming thing about Mr. Trump is also because he's not a complete politician, he came from outside of this space, he can more freely, express himself the way he wants to do things, and then maybe hope the policymakers will now try to put the ingredients together. Now, in the case of the Ukraine war, why it's not exactly a simple matter is because the United States belongs to an alliance called NATO, and that NATO alliance binds all of them together, and it binds them together in a manner whereby, well, on a very basic level, that an attack on one of them is an attack on all of them, which is why they have been very successful at maintaining their influence on global matters, because they band together. The unity is very strong, and unity is desirable no matter what anybody is doing. So for the US to now pull out completely from the Ukraine war, they're going to have to bring everyone in NATO together. And explain why they need to do this in a certain way, and why they and that's going to be quite a bit of work. That's not something that's going to happen in 24 hours. It's going to be a lot of diplomacy at play. You're going to have to persuade Germany, France, UK, and all the countries who feel that they have an interest in getting Russia to leave Ukraine. Yeah.
Okay, so knowing what you know now, would you run for elections in Nigeria again? Are you eyeing 2027 presidency? I know what I'm doing. I just got you.
That's so interesting. That seems to be so far off. But the thing is that we watch. Sometimes it's clearer to observe Nigeria from the outside because you see all kinds of micro details that people on the inside do not see sometimes, because people on the inside are dug in on one corner and they both ethnically, religiously and otherwise, and stick there. One of the issues that we had when I contemplated and actually engaged with the Labour Party as a presidential aspirant in 2019 was that we put together a very solid team of researchers and consultants and canvassed Nigeria to understand the environment. And at the end of the day, we produced a report that showed that everything was about ethnicity and religion.
Okay.
No matter how you slice it, you try to go about it one way, you try to go about it another way, you try to go about it, everything points down to the same thing, ethnicity and religion. And with a situation like that, it is not an easy task to build a political coalition in Nigeria without compromising certain things or maybe utilizing money to maybe influence things that should ordinarily not have been influenceable.
Of course.
Yeah.
And then compromise on your values, because you have to speak to your village people and remind them that, please, you have to support me because I'm yours. You know?
But at the end of the day, there's hope for Nigeria, because Nigeria happens to be powerful by default without having done anything. Without having done anything, it's powerful because of the geopolitical placement of Nigeria in the West, in the African map, where it is, with all the resources that are there, and then the people are so resilient that and so creative and so talented that you take a certain kind of person to bring it out of them. And over the past 60 years, I don't think that person has come. Maybe that person is still being molded somehow. That person has not come.
Could that person be you?
Well, we don't know. We'll keep it everything that. But also an interesting development in the last presidential election also struck my team as something that is actually a step forward. The fact that ordinary people can contribute money to a candidate, regardless of who that candidate is. Now, when we were out there in 2019, it was basically a matter of give me money, give me money, give me money. I mean, you come into the party headquarters and everyone from the person at the gate to the party chairman is like, sticking their hands up. Now there's a few people, a very small percentage of people that are also well-intentioned in the political space in Nigeria, but those people are numbered by the ones that have their total being immersed in corruption. But because of developments in the last election where people were actually contributing money to people, what the nation needs to see in the next election and beyond, 27 and beyond, is let's say maybe there are three major parties that are presenting credible candidates, but all those candidates have to be with the same kind of energy as one of the candidates who got a lot of organic support the last time. The three parties have to think along the lines. Let's say the APC, the PDP, and the LP, or whatever other mergers that may happen in the future, they have to be able to bring out candidates that are about at the same level in terms of maybe age, level of enlightenment and exposure, and then capacity.
Exactly.
So that way there will be a true competition Now, wishes are not horses, so no one knows what's going to happen, but that would be the ideal situation for the country, because if the country gets it right, you'll be so amazed at how far this country can go.
Right.
And because one of the things that's really struck me is that the economy, for example, the economy is about $528 billion gross domestic product as of the last time I checked, but it actually should be more than $1 trillion, because there's a lot of domestic economic activity. We send our people into the fields to research and see, and we see that most Nigerians are self-employed.
Well, it doesn't matter. It shouldn't affect data if we were gathering.
Yeah, if we're gathering the data properly, yeah, because at the end of the day, people complain unemployment rate is 40%, 50%, 60%, but actually, majority of Nigerians are exchanging goods and services.
Every single one has
something they're doing, and they go around the big cities, whether it's Abuja or Lagos, you see that energy is 24 hours. And these people are not paying taxes, they're not regulated, the government doesn't really know about them. Some woman selling akara, who's some woman selling recharge POS and all those other things that they do, that everyone is busy doing. All those can be incorporated into the economy in a proper way, where they will get both the benefits of being entrepreneurs and then also contribute a little towards the well-being of the country. All those things are possible, but the people who have been running Nigeria over the past, I'll say, 50 years or thereabout, have not only figured out or zeroed in that this is what it takes to grow a nation. Because a nation with a large population like this can have a very strong internal economy.
Right.
And once you get that internal economy straightened at a point whereby you begin to attract things from the outside, interest from the outside, people who want to come and invest into that economy. Tourism, for example, is non-existent in Nigeria.
Well, believe it or not, we've gone 1 hour into the program and we're having this conversation. Time flies when we're having a good time. I've learned a lot from your experience. Thank you for being part of the show.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure.
It is my pleasure as well. But this is where we end today's edition of Joy Asanye Live. Keep a date with us next week as we return with so much more. Have a restful evening.